Hello and welcome to Author's Note. The news now is that Britain is finally out of a double-dip recession. The growth numbers out this week were positive, 1% quarterly growth, better than consensus forecast. But what does this mean? Does it mean the economy has finally turned the corner? And is the government's fiscal deficit reduction plan working? With me to discuss this today is Jonathan Portes, who's the director of the National Institute for Economic and Social Research. Jonathan, thanks very much for being with us.
Good morning.
Let's start by looking at the growth record in Britain over the last couple of years, from 2005 up until now. We see here the nice, smooth growth before the crash, the huge recession, the slight recovery, and the double dip. And finally, a positive result this quarter, the third quarter of 2012. Does this mean we can finally relax and say, well, we got the worst behind us, the economy has turned, things are working?
Not necessarily. The double dip recession was always a bit of hype, frankly. It was never that bad. Equally, yesterday's figures aren't nearly that good. The figures of the previous quarter were distorted negatively by the Jubilee Bank holiday.
Right.
This quarter is distorted positively by the reversal of that effect, not to mention the Olympics. Really, if you look back over the past 2 years and discount the noise, what you see is no to very slow growth. So what we are still in is what you might call a non-recovery. We should be in a decent, steady recovery by now, and as yet, we're not.
Seems like we've had this string of special effects every quarter, which means nobody's been sure of anything. And your point, I guess, is quite clear graphically. If we just look at the last 2 years, it all kind of evens out around the zero line. So your best guess is we're sort of continuing to head flat?
Very slight growth, but growth well below the trend rate of growth in the economy, whereas at this point...
Which is how much?
Maybe between 2 and 2.5%, a little over 2 in our book. Other people could differ. But the point is, with so much spare capacity, lots of unemployment, GDP well below anybody's estimate of trend, we should be growing faster than trend, not slower than trend.
Let's look at the public finances, which are, of course, at the core of the argument about whether the economy is doing what it should be. So we have another chart here. This is the public sector deficit, the fiscal deficit, which is the core of the coalition's program. They want to reduce it, and they've wanted to reduce it faster than the previous government had planned. The red line is the actual outturn, the 12-month rolling sum of monthly deficit. So we see, of course, this is negative, so this is the peak of the deficit right here when the government took office, and it's been coming back, but it's still huge, 120 billion pounds. That's close to 10% of GDP, 8-9% of GDP. It's slightly better than people predicted in August, which is the blue line. Now, is this good news or bad news? Have things been working out?
Well, clearly things haven't been working out. But I think it's important to think about what this tells us. Back at this point, this is the point of the coalition's post-election emergency budget. They said...
End of 2010, right?
Middle of 2010.
Yeah.
Middle of 2010, around here. They said if we carried on this green line, it would be a disaster for the country. Gilt yields would soar, we'd lose the AAA credit rating, everything would be a disaster. And in fact, the Financial Times, of course, took exactly the same line at the time. It would be a disaster if we stayed on this green line.
So the green line was a prediction under the Darling budget.
Exactly. So where are we now? Well, we'd be lucky to be on the green line, frankly, let alone the yellow line. So what's happened? Have interest rates soared? No, they haven't. In fact, interest rates have remained have come down considerably since then and are historically at record low levels. What does that tell you? It tells you that the basic economic analysis behind this plan, and indeed the basic economic analysis that the Financial Times was propounding, has been completely disproved. People like Paul Krugman in the US and Simon Wren-Lewis and indeed Martin Wolf on the FT's editorial page got it absolutely right. It wasn't high budget deficits that were leading to low interest rates. It was the desire of the private sector to continue to save. And what that means is that the right course would have been for the government, at least as long as we didn't see a strong recovery, for the government to continue to borrow to try and get us out of this recession.
Now, of course, what's been happening in the last couple of months is that the borrowing has been higher than they predicted, than they wanted. So is this what we should expect? And is it also what you recommend, that this deficit line should actually continue to be flat, high deficits, because that might be better for the economy?
Absolutely. I mean, it would be mad to tighten fiscal policy now. We need fiscal consolidation over the medium to long term. We need, at some point, to get back up onto this this line, whether the yellow or the green one, but we need to get the deficit down. But the right time to bring the deficit down is when the economy is growing above trend, when we're closing the gap properly. We should worry about growth now, deficit later.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for watching Author's Note on FT.com.